Criticism is one of the most powerful things a person can wield. It can be used to give insight or provide improvements somebody can make to their work that they might not be able to see for themselves. Having that outside critical eye to look over something you are creating can be one of the most helpful things someone can give you. But on the opposite side, criticism can be the single worst thing that can happen to you. Whether we like it or not, anytime we release anything into the world, it is subject to criticism, and the internet has only amplified this. Anything you say or create can be shared to over 4.5 billion people, and that is absolutely terrifying. Anyone and everyone can openly critique you without knowing anything about who you truly are. With this ability to say almost anything you want behind an anonymous username, criticism has been abused into tearing people down just because they're human. We are becoming a society that remembers someone's failures instead of their achievements. This power has never been held by a previous generation, and it feels like people don't know what to do with it. Instead of tearing each other down with this crab mentality, we could just as easily be building each other up. With these videos, I'm opening myself up to your judgment of what you think about me as a person when all you know about me is what you've seen within the length of my videos. I expect to get criticism on my content, since I'm still trying to figure out my individual style, and the constructive criticism I have received from other content creators so far has been tremendous in helping me hone my craft. The thing about this positive constructive criticism is that it seems to be the rarest form of critique to come across. Most people don't make YouTube videos or create video games, so they don't honestly know what they can say that can truly be helpful. I genuinely want to believe that people actually want to help you, they just don't know the right way of going about it. Most of the nice commenters usually default to saying things like excellent video or good job, and while that's amazing to hear, it's just not really helpful in the long run.
There are no two words in the English language more harmful than good job.
In the context of The Last of Us Part 2, Naughty Dog has been developing a single product for over 5 years. 5 full years. Developing a 25-hour sequel to a game many players hold up as one of the greatest pieces of fiction ever made. So what do they decide to do? They make a divisive follow-up that will knowingly split the fanbase instead of taking the easy route and just play it safe. In multiple interviews before release, the game director Neil Druckmann knew that this divisiveness was almost certain, with a quote saying, "I'd rather have people passionately hate it than just be like, yeah, it was okay." This man is braver than I am, because the amount of hate anyone involved with this project has received is absolutely disgusting. Sending someone death threats because you personally didn't like something they made? How could anyone think that that is acceptable behavior? This game was not specifically made for you, and you can have problems and criticisms with it, but you have the mentality of a child if you think harassing someone online is the correct way of expressing your feelings. You have to be able to express why you didn't like something in a constructive way, because if everything just boils down to it sucks, you aren't adding anything to a discussion. You just want to hear your own voice. Now, when I first beat this game, I hated it. Naughty Dog crafted a story that left me hating almost every single character from both games. With The Last of Us 1, I actually didn't outright love Joel, like a lot of people do. I understood him as a broken person doing anything to survive, and his decision at the end was his last chance of living a normal life. He was going to save Ellie, no matter the consequences. I can't even begin to comprehend the sacrifices a parent is willing to make to save their children, because I'm not a parent, and for that, I really can't judge Joel for the actions he committed. He risked everything to save Ellie, and I can sympathize with that, because she was the star of the show for me in the first game. She was a smart-ass kid that talked back to the adults, and that gave us a momentary break from our serious journey that we so desperately needed.
How the hell would he even walk around with that thing?
Get rid of that.
No, hold your horses. I want to see what all the fuss is about. Oh, why are these all stuck together? I'm just fucking with you.
The first game was a tale that struck a chord with so many people, and there is no doubt in my mind that the second one was going to as well, just not as controversially as I previously thought. When all those hate-filled comments started surfacing, I took a step back and went looking for the opposite opinion of mine and began rewatching the game's cutscenes for a second time. That's when I was prepared to actively listen to what this story meant to people and how it made them feel, and only then did I understand just how important this story actually is. Besides watching the first couple of trailers for the game, this experience was completely blind for me. I thankfully didn't see any of the leaks, and I also didn't have any preconceived notions of where I wanted the story to go. I was just along for another wild ride. But this game was different. It wasn't the bombastic cinematics that drew me in, rather the opposite actually. It was in the quiet moments where I felt this game truly excelled, and the opening of the game perfectly demonstrated this. We start by seeing Joel tell Tommy the decision he made, and it works so well because we are transported back into the world almost instantly. Joel then goes to check on Ellie and give her the guitar that he has rebuilt, and this whole interaction feels so real. It really reminds us of the relationship that Joel and Ellie have. After waiting for it to happen throughout the entire first game, we finally get to hear Joel sing to Ellie, and it's such a beautiful moment between the two of them. But most importantly, we get to see Joel tell Ellie a dad joke.
What is the downside to eating a clock? It's time consuming.
Oh yeah, then he gets tortured and murdered. Joel dying is the catalyst that sets this whole revenge story into motion, and yeah, I may not have liked how he got tortured for what was probably hours, but they clearly explain the motivations that have obsessed Abby into doing this. But what I didn't understand was why the series of unfortunate events that led to Joel's death go directly against the rules that were clearly established in the first game. Since the sequel actually follows the first game and is continuing the story from where it left off, this means we can actually look at the first game and see the rules that have already been established. Rule number 1, everyone you see is out to protect themselves, and they will do anything to ensure their own survival. In the first game, Henry just leaves you to die when you're being chased by the car equipped with a machine gun. He is putting the survival of himself and his brother above anyone else. Rule number 2, the only societies left are filled with either murdering psychopaths or heavily armed militia patrols. Rule number 3, do not trust anyone because of rule number 1. We are shown every different variation of these societies, with the Fireflies being the heavily armed one and a society just beginning to form with Tommy's camp. So when we apply these same guidelines to the second game, we start to notice a departure of these clearly defined rules. The path from when Joel saves Abby to where Abby tortures him is the first instance in which these rules are warped. With an entire army of infected coming after them, Tommy, in the split second that he gets to not be in survival mode, tells Abby his and Joel's names. This is where we can physically see Abby connect the dots that she has finally found the person that she has been looking for. This right here is the biggest plot hole. Notice it's in quotations. That is the most pointed out one amongst the people that have major problems with the story. Why would Tommy give out their names so easily? I don't know, maybe because he's shitting his pants over the army of infected that's trying to tear him apart. I don't really have a problem with Tommy spilling their names to Abby, because yeah, you can justify it by saying they were under attack by an army of infected. That's not the bigger issue. It's that The Last of Us Part 2 clearly doesn't follow the rules that were shown in the first game. When Ellie is approached by David, she doesn't give out her name because she knows not to blindly trust people in this world. She is following rule number 3 here to not trust anybody, and that's why it's become so easy for people to pick apart why Tommy blindly trusted Abby. The counter argument to this problem, and the one I believe to be true, is that Tommy has lowered his guard around people after living in a society again for 4 years. Jackson is a peaceful society that he has personally helped build from the ground up, and for someone that has lived in a safe civilization for 4 years, I would expect him to develop a peace of mind. This can only be assumed though, because we aren't explicitly shown that Tommy has developed that illusion of safety. The beginning only spends about 30 minutes in Jackson, and we see that it has flourished into a functioning society, but we are never explicitly shown that Jackson has proven rule number 2 false, so that's why there is so much discourse around the character of Tommy. If there had been a scene or an interaction that points to Tommy trusting people too easily, it would silence this point entirely. A little foreshadowing would have gone a long way. In the grand scheme, this is only a minor nitpick because there's still over 20 hours of the story to play after Joel's death. Just like in the first game, this one starts with a serious emotional impact that catches us off guard. Doing that convincingly for a second game in a row is incredibly hard to do, and it also is able to do something that so many other games fail at doing. It keeps the emotions coming. The Last of Us Part 2 is not a fun game to play. It's disturbingly violent and goes out of its way to make the kill animations as realistic as possible. The journey is an emotional roller coaster that lets you experience the constantly shifting emotional states these characters are in. The cinematics and motion capture that is used to enhance the player's experience are so lifelike that they physically upset me at some points, and I had to put my controller down and stop playing. With the second game, Naughty Dog decided that instead of just focusing on love like the first game did, why not juggle both hatred and love? This game lets us experience the full spectrum of human emotions, and no scene demonstrates this better than Joel's death scene. If we only focus on Ellie during this scene, we can see this emotional juggling act in real time. The acting is so raw and believable that we can actually feel her love towards Joel when she is begging and pleading for his life. This scene is so painfully beautiful and tragic to watch because we just know what's going to happen next and we are powerless to stop it. When the final swing connects, we can physically see the sadness that washes over Ellie's face. We get the full range of her emotions, from love to sadness, and then finally, hatred. These three emotions right here are what we feel on this journey throughout Seattle, but we don't start our journey just yet. First, we must experience Joel's wake. Instead of allowing the player to only feel that initial rush of hatred towards Abby and rush us straight into Seattle, we are given a chance to mourn the death of a friend. After visiting Joel's grave, we get to go through his house and we get to experience the last 4 years of his life at our own pace. We personally get to choose how long we need to grieve for Joel while exploring his house. This right here is one of the rawest emotional moments I've ever felt in a game, and it's truly believable that Ellie has lost someone that means the world to her. Making this section of the game playable was such a brilliant move. Naughty Dog has always excelled at the finer details, but this high point is where the bar is set from now on. The interactive objects in his house, such as the brochure from the museum, the picture of him and Sarah, and the most heartbreaking one, when she smells his jacket, convey so much meaning to us and to Ellie. Even the objects we don't interact with elicit the same emotional responses as the interactive ones. The Idiot's Guide to Space is lying on Joel's nightstand, and when I realized what that meant, I got tears in my eyes. Even though Ellie hasn't spoken to him in about 2 years, he still takes the time to learn about her interests as a way to connect with her on a deeper level. Joel risked everything to save her, and lying about what actually happened caused Ellie to push herself away from him, but he never stopped loving her as his own child. With all these raw emotions stirring inside of her, Ellie finally sets off for Seattle, and it's about a half an hour in that we get to my favorite playable part of the game. We see Ellie and Dina ride into this open field in search of fuel for a gate generator. Naughty Dog has built open world areas in their games before, but this one is their best attempt yet. Almost everything is missable in this section, and you as the player get to decide how much of the area you want to explore. We have this tourist map that helps us keep track of where we've been, and it also gets filled in by clues that point us towards potential places of interest. The only tasks that are required of you are to find a container, fill it with gas, and return to the generator. The optional areas are there to reward you with helpful items or give you beautiful cutscenes that deepen the emotional bond between Ellie and Dina. Take the bank for example. It's crawling with infected since no one has cleared the vault out yet. You really have to weigh the potential rewards you might find in this place versus the ammo and resources you will have to spend in order to clear it out. If you decide to risk it, you are rewarded with a shotgun very early in the game, and you get to hear some amazing backstory about the people that got trapped in the bank vault. Apparently, they were planning to rob the bank on Outbreak Day, and well, it didn't go according to their plan. Inside, the bank vault is completely filled with bags of money, and we realize that Ellie and Dina never grew up in a world controlled by money. They even have a conversation about what they would do with all the money that was still inside the bank vault, and it offers some excellent foreshadowing for what happens later in the game. The other rewarding side area is the music store, and we are gifted with Dina's amazing drum skills.
Oh, wow, that was an interesting beat.
This place also has a guitar that Ellie uses to get some practice time in, and we witness her start to sing the song that Joel played for her. When Dina asks what that was, Ellie shrugs it off and says it was nothing, which shows us that she's just not ready to talk about what that song actually means to her. We then get this beautiful rendition of Take On Me, and the glances between Ellie and Dina tell us so much more than words ever could. For anyone that has ever played music in front of other people, the feeling you get from performing cannot be replicated in any other way. There's a certain vulnerability in playing your instrument in front of people because you're opening yourself up to their judgment and criticism. It's probably the most nervous you will ever be, but once you start playing and the nerves melt away, you get this euphoric high from playing. You feel untouchable, like you're floating on a cloud, but you're also filled with adrenaline all at the same time. It's such a beautiful scene. And if you missed it on your playthrough, I highly recommend going and watching the whole thing. There are only a handful of gentle moments throughout this game, and that helps each one hit that emotional sweet spot just that much more. Once we finally get through the gate that was blocking our path, we are treated to this lovely scene. Ellie gets captured, Dina escapes, and Shimmer gets put down. The people that capture Ellie were some of the people that were a part of Joel's murder, and this individual character right here was one of the most poorly written characters of the game. Let me explain. This character's name is Jordan, and with Ellie captured and tied up, he goes to try and extract information from her. She mocks him for the scar that she gave him the last time they met, and he just brushes it off. When the guy that captured Ellie says that they have direct orders to kill all trespassers, what does Jordan do? He disobeys a direct order and stops that from happening in an attempt to find out more information on how many people actually came with Ellie. He has traveled the same amount of distance as Ellie, and he knows the determination and hatred one must possess in order to brave that journey. Just before Ellie is killed, Dina saves the day by killing the guy pointing his gun at Ellie, and then Jordan shoots the glass ceiling out, causing Dina to fall from pretty high up. Jordan has just witnessed Dina kill without hesitation. So what does he do next? He holsters his weapon. At Joel's slaughter, this same character has to be physically restrained to stop him from kicking Ellie, and when Owen prevents Manny from shooting her, he steps in to kill her himself. Every instance in which we have seen this character on screen points us to believe that he is willing to kill in order to stay alive. And this is why I have a hard time believing he would just disobey his human survival instincts by not shooting them. He may have felt in control before Dina showed up, but it was quickly shown that that was a false sense of security. He was so worried about how many people were with them, and when another person shows up, he decides to choke her to death instead of shooting her. I may be harping on one specific minor character, but that's because it's part of the larger problem of contradicting the minor characters. One of the reasons why the first game is so convincing is because the minor character's human traits are so believable. The best example of this is the time Henry leaves you to die in order to save his little brother. Joel and Ellie barely make it out of this situation alive, and when Joel confronts him about it, Henry's logic is the same as everyone else's that has survived that long.
He's pissed, but he's not gonna do anything. You sure about that? Stop!
Joel?
He left us to die out there. No, you had a good chance of making it, and you did. But coming back for you meant putting him at risk. Stay back. If it was the other way around, would you have come back for us? I saved you.
Joel knows the logic checks out, and that's why he spares Henry, because he would have done the exact same thing in his position. This interaction demonstrates rules 1 and 3 perfectly, and we only get to see that the rules are actually not the same as the first game until the very end. Jordan was the only character I had continuity errors with, but there was another character that had some bigger issues.
We know you're going to start this journey hating this character. Can we bring you back? That's the challenge. And in a lesser way, like when we were making Last of Us 1, the thing we would always say, if you don't love Ellie the way we want you to love Ellie, this game falls apart. And for this game, we said, if you don't buy into Abby's journey and why she's done what she's done and the relationship she has with the characters, then this game falls apart. And admittedly, right, for some people it does. As some people resist it so much because of their love for Joel or their hate for Abby, the second half doesn't work for them. But I think for most people, they start the journey with this very strong anger, this very negative feeling, and over time that softens. And I think for a lot of people around the Yara and Lev area is where they're like, okay, all right, fine, I'm into this journey now.
Naughty Dog knew that some players wouldn't come around and understand Abby, and admittedly, this is what happened to me when I finished the game. I hated Abby, and I didn't enjoy her gameplay sections as much because of it. But I want to be clear, I didn't just blindly hate Abby. I understand her motivations for killing Joel because we're given a believable reason as to why she did what she did. We start her journey right after the crescendo of Ellie's, and it starts with the flashback that kickstarted her quest for revenge. We find out that the surgeon that Joel killed in order to save Ellie was Abby's father, and it's at this point where we start to understand why Abby hates Joel so much. Seeing Abby's side of history right after a peek in Ellie's story was an excellent move, storytelling wise. It gives the players some much needed backstory and allows the writers to have two branching stories going in tandem with each other. Though, this game doesn't switch back and forth between Abby and Ellie's expeditions. Instead, it lets us play out the 3 days of Ellie's journey through Seattle and then the same 3 days through Abby's perspective. It's the surprise twist to the story. The only problem with that is that all throughout Abby's journey, I just wanted to see what happens with the cliffhanger we were left on. The thing with multiple stories happening is that you can switch between them once one reaches a peak and then take a look at what's going on with the other side. If they would have done it that way, there would have been a problem though. Switching between Ellie and Abby every day would have ruined the surprise of Abby being an integral part of the story. I understand why they chose to do it the way that they did, I just don't know if it would have worked with switching back and forth. Right after the flashback with Abby's dad, we see the scene of Joel's murder through Abby's side, and we are reminded just how brutal of a person she can be by how she tortured Joel. This was one of the many reasons why I couldn't like Abby. I may have understood why she killed Joel, but she tortured him for what seemed like hours. If it would have been a one-time thing for killing her father, I would somewhat understand, but she finds torturing people as a form of stress relief. In the Wolf Base, the apartment buildings are used for extracting information, i.e. torture, and right before we meet Isaac for the first time, we get this optional dialogue from Abby.
After our morning, I wouldn't mind a few minutes with these guys.
I hear that.
Abby gets physical pleasure from torturing people, and this dialogue choice proves that. Though Abby is not the only person that we see torture someone, because Ellie is just as guilty as Abby. Abby's whole section is there to show us a mirror reflection of the person Ellie devolves into. Ellie and Abby aren't so different, and they are more alike than they probably want to be. It's this duality between them that shows us they have similar motivations, and the atrocities they commit are just perpetuating the cycle of revenge. Abby was blinded by this cycle and didn't stop until she had finished what she thought needed to happen, no matter the cost. She may have gotten the revenge she was seeking, but it cost her the relationships with the people closest to her. Even after killing Joel, she still has the PTSD flashbacks and is no better off, and that's exactly the same road we see Ellie spiraling towards. But it's not just Ellie and Abby that are reflections of each other, but also Abby and Joel because they take similar journeys across these two games. Abby and Lev are basically Joel and Ellie from the first game. They are both people set in their ways that become better throughout their journey by helping someone other than themselves. They may have been similar journeys, but the biggest difference between them was the length of time they had to completely change as people. I think we can all agree that Abby and Joel were both stubborn people that were set in their ways when we first met them. They wouldn't do anything unless it directly benefited themselves. With Joel, he gets to spend almost an entire year with Ellie, and throughout their time together, we get to see the kinship grow between the two of them. We slowly see Joel start to grow more attached to Ellie, and their relationship blossoms into something beautiful and meaningful. Abby does this entire personal journey in only 2 days. Yara and Lev save Abby. She has a PTSD dream about them dying, and then she goes to save the two people that her group has been at war with for so many years. Abby has been killing these enemies for years now, and no one can understand why she's having a change of heart. Even Mel, the person pregnant with Owen's baby, calls her out on exactly this.
I haven't always done the right thing.
You're a piece of shit, Abby.
You always have been.
She has suddenly decided that looking after two kids might actually lead her back to the light, but she still brushes off everyone close to her during this redemption arc. Abby and Owen had a very intimate encounter the previous night, and before she leaves, Owen tries to talk to her about it, and she just gives him the cold shoulder.
I don't care about last night.
Well, I do.
Owen cheats on his pregnant girlfriend with Abby, and she completely ignores his obvious feelings for her. They may have been done with their previous romantic relationship, but she completely disregards his feelings about the most intimate thing two people can experience together, and wouldn't even talk with him about it. That is seriously cold-hearted. Abby has completely gone AWOL from the Wolf group, and on the day she was supposed to lead an attack on the Scars Island, she is about to leave Seattle. Lev doesn't want to leave without making amends with his mom, so he takes off to the Scar Island. Abby and Yara follow in pursuit and find him cowering in his mom's house after he had to kill her in self-defense. I had no problems with Yara or Lev, and from what I've seen online, they did an excellent job of not stereotyping a trans character, but both characters felt like they were underdeveloped. Being able to see the interaction with his mom would have been way more impactful to his story, even if it was only a cutscene. By just seeing the aftermath of the situation, we could have gotten a very similar reaction from him if they had never gone to the island in the first place. Really, the only thing of importance that happens on the island is the interaction between Abby and the wolf leader, Isaac. Abby gets surrounded and has to explain herself to Isaac on why she is protecting the sworn enemy of the wolf group. Her reasoning is very simple, but it also serves to contradict her entire redemption arc.
What's that behind you?
He saved my life.
Man, too bad Joel didn't save Abby's life, or else he might have been spared. Oh shit, he actually did. I know that's not a strong point to make because of the history between Joel and Abby. It's there to highlight her change towards becoming a better person, but it just wasn't believable to me. The most convincing line that is supposed to highlight her redemption arc is this line.
Come on, those were your fucking people. You're my people.
It's an extremely impactful line, and it serves to fully develop Abby's and Lev's relationship, but I was already checked out at that point. My entire 10 hours through Abby's part was spent on wondering what was going to happen to Ellie, and it distracted me so much that Abby's section just fell flat for me. The final nail in her coffin was when she had her showdown with Ellie in the cinema. After Abby takes the upper hand in the fight and almost kills Ellie, Dina intervenes, and Abby nearly beats her to death as well. With a knife to Dina's throat, Ellie tells Abby that she's pregnant, and without hesitation, Abby says,
Good.
The only reason she stops is because of Lev. Abby has not become a better person in any way. The only thing she has done was choose to protect someone to make herself feel like she was actually growing as a human being. Ellie isn't any better though. She tortures someone and kills a pregnant woman, but she is actually visibly shaken to her core by these terrible actions she chooses to commit. Abby takes pleasure in torturing people, and while Ellie didn't know Mel was pregnant, Abby fully knew about Dina's pregnancy. That doesn't make either character's actions justified by any means, but for the life of me, I cannot understand in any way how anyone could have been convinced into thinking Abby is a better person by the end of the game. She is a selfish, violence-loving shrew that I hated playing as, but the worst part about that, so is Ellie. Right before Abby shows up at the cinema, we see that Ellie was willing to leave Seattle without getting her revenge on Abby. Ellie was able to give up her quest for revenge to ensure the safety and well-being of Dina and her unborn child. After Abby spares their lives, we see that Ellie, Dina, and their child Potato are living happily in the farmhouse that Dina has always wanted. It's such a nice break from the violence that we've been experiencing for the last 20 hours, and to just be able to walk around a farm became such a highlight of the game for me. We see that Ellie and Dina truly care about each other, and the relationship that is shown between them fluctuates with the ups and downs of the Seattle trip. When Ellie's mask breaks near the end of day 1, Dina is willing to put herself at risk by sharing her mask in order to prevent Ellie from getting infected. Once they barely get to safety, Ellie fully explains how she's immune, and immediately after she's done, Dina then says she's pregnant. This is literally the only time the two of them ever talk about Ellie being immune, and it's so bizarre that they don't touch on it again, given how crucial it was in the first game. After Ellie knows Dina is pregnant, Ellie makes sure that Dina isn't put into danger and tells her to stay back at the cinema, because Dina would have just been one more thing to worry about. These two have a developing relationship, and it was so beautiful to know that both of them were always looking out for the other. Back at the farmhouse, while rounding up the sheep they have on their farm, Ellie has a PTSD flashback of Joel's murder, and it's shown very clearly that this is a daily struggle for her. The way Dina gently reacts to bring Ellie back to reality shows us that Dina is incredibly patient and just wants to help. After that, we see Tommy somehow survive taking a bullet to the head and has a lead on where Abby is hiding out. This is the instance on where Tommy became my most hated character. He has some major problems after being shot in the head, and that makes it very difficult for him to get around. His wife has left him, and he has nothing going for him, so he decides to guilt Ellie into going after Abby because he can't. He is the most spiteful character in this game, and is jealous of the relationship that Dina and Ellie have. He had to face the consequences of just leaving his wife to go on what seems like a suicide mission, and he can't stand that Ellie was able to move on, so he thinks. Ellie is clearly struggling with this information of Abby's location and tries to sneak out in the middle of the night to avoid having to deal with Dina. But Dina catches her moments before she is about to leave. This is where we can see just how much both of them are dealing with. Dina just wants to live as normal of a life as you possibly can in their world, and Ellie is controlled by her PTSD, and her thirst for revenge is unquenchable. She is extremely selfish with her decision to leave and won't acknowledge what Dina has to say. Dina finally gives her an ultimatum where if she leaves, they're done, and Ellie's cold-hearted response is,
That's up to you.
this is the person you were willing to leave Seattle for, to make sure they were taken care of, and Ellie just throws her to the side like she was nothing. All the talk of her biggest fears ending up alone and not wanting to lose Dina has been taken over by her revenge she is clearly blinded by. Ellie makes these decisions because she's hoping to get rid of her daily nightmares that happen in broad daylight. She sets off on her journey once again to go kill Abby, and this brings us to the climax of the story, the final showdown. Abby and Lev have been held in a prison camp for the last 6 months, and Ellie finds the two of them tied up at the beach, just being left there to die. Abby has lost all of her muscle, hasn't eaten in days, and Ellie forces her to one final fight. This fight is brutal, in every sense of the word. We can see the physical emotion behind every punch, and the cries of pain that come out from Abby are way too real. It seems like neither party has an upper hand until Ellie finally wears Abby down to nothing and is just about to drown her. In this exact moment, we see just how far someone is willing to go to ensure their own survival. Abby bites off 2 of Ellie's fingers as she is being drowned, trying desperately to stay alive. Ellie breaks down into tears as she is holding Abby down and finally realizes that this is not going to solve anything. Abby lives, and Ellie has sacrificed everything she holds dear in order to finally break the cycle of revenge. It has been stated multiple times that the game is ultimately about the love you have for someone and what that will drive you to do. With letting Abby live, Ellie is essentially forgiving herself and Joel all in one action. I don't think Ellie can ever forgive Abby, but Ellie knows that Abby has to live in order to find peace within herself. The cycle of revenge is broken finally, but Ellie has to be the bigger person to do so. Abby gets to live and goes off to rejoin the remaining Fireflies that are left, and Ellie gets to go back to the farmhouse. In the final scenes at the farmhouse, we find it empty, except for the stuff related to Joel. We essentially see that Ellie has lost everything in her destructive journey, but I saw a different interpretation of the ending as a YouTube comment. The user MellowBeta posted that Ellie is wearing the bracelet that Dina gave her when they were in Seattle, but she didn't have it on her last solo journey. This suggests that Dina has gotten back together with Ellie after everything they have been through, but I don't think she actually has. See, Dina is a very strong person, and what Ellie put her through to go out on her selfish journey is irredeemable in my eyes. Dina specifically said they would be done if Ellie left, and Ellie said that choice was hers to make. Ellie was a selfish one, implying that she can sit there and wait for her, so she could potentially get killed on her never-ending quest of vengeance. I really hope that Dina is a strong enough individual to not let a toxic person like that back into her life, but maybe she is able to give forgiveness where I wouldn't be able to. Then again, the final flashback is all about forgiving someone that has selfishly turned your life upside down just for their personal gain. I honestly can't figure out if this game would have been told better in a linear fashion or the way it was. It fleshes everything out at the end and gives some much needed context to almost every single moment of the game with this one cutscene. We get to see the last interaction that Joel and Ellie had the day before Joel gets murdered. The acting in this scene is the best I've ever witnessed in a video game. It's truly soul-crushing, but also heartwarming all at the same time. Ellie finally tells Joel that she wants to start trying to forgive him for taking away the only reason her life could have actually meant something. We also see that the terrible acts that Joel committed in order to save Ellie didn't actually give him the thing he wanted most of all, to spend time with his daughter. The first half of the 4 years that Ellie and Joel were living in Jackson, she was suspicious about the story that Joel told her about what actually went down in the hospital. The second half was spent with Ellie giving Joel the cold shoulder after she finally hears Joel confess about what he did. He may have gotten to be around her for those 4 years, but he didn't get rewarded with the father-daughter relationship he so badly wanted. That's why this final scene is just so heartbreaking. He risked his life to save Ellie's, just for the slim chance he has at living a normal life, and then he doesn't even get that. Jesus Christ, this game is depressing. This last flashback gives us insight on almost every question or problem we might have had from the time they spent in Jackson. It breaks all 3 rules I outlined in the first game and shows us that Jackson was capable of building a functioning society. People were able to pass through and trade with Joel to get his coffee, thus showing you can actually trust some people in their world. A society was actually capable of forming, and they were able to lower their guards to strangers and do business with them. But the major problem with filling in the context at the end is that if you weren't invested all the way through the game, this moment doesn't hit the emotional heights it should. When I got to this scene, it didn't take me to the emotional heights it should have because I was 100% checked out at that point. I just wanted the game to be done because I didn't enjoy my experience the first time through. I'm making this video 3 months after I've beaten the game, and I've had some time to reflect on everything that happened along this journey. There are so many scenes that hit me the way they should have when I went back and watched them for the second time. In this final flashback, we get the subtle voice crack from Joel, showing us that he is capable of showing emotions as well. He is a man of such few words that doesn't ever show his emotional side, and all we need to hear from him is this subtle human response.
I'll see you around.
Yep.
This conveys to us that Joel might be able to finally get the one thing he risked his life for, and that means the world to him. But all this context is only conveyed from Joel getting choked up and clearing his throat. That scene alone is a masterclass in subtle storytelling. Even the scene where Ellie tells Dina, "I don't want to lose you," is so much more powerful to me when watching it for the second time. From the handshaking, voice cracking, and lip quiver alone, we see that Ellie is struggling with the decision she just made. But when she says,
I made her talk.
she realizes that she has done the same atrocities as Abby. God, this line is so heartbreaking.
I don't want to lose you.
She is doing all of this to avenge Joel's death, but now she is putting Dina in the middle of it, and it's killing her inside. This game is so dense, and I didn't even touch on the overall extreme violence of this game or the crunch conditions that went into making it, but I will be making 2 separate videos on both of these topics in the next couple of months. For now, these are my final thoughts on the game. After listening to the different critiques and understanding both sides of the debate, I don't outright hate The Last of Us Part 2 anymore. I still think some of the decisions most of the characters made were very questionable, and I ended up hating most of them. The Last of Us excelled at showing us how both enemies and allies made choices that real humans might actually make in a world destroyed by a deadly virus. In Part 2, the game focuses more on the overall path the story must take instead of the interactions between the individual characters, and that's what I had most of my issues with. It took a character that made the first game so special and turned her into a hate-filled killing machine bent on destroying everything in her path in order to kill a single person. Both Ellie and Abby have done the same atrocious things in order to kill one person. Neither character can be redeemed for their actions, and both are broken shells of the people they once were. I don't think either person deserved a happy ending, considering the indecency they portrayed, but I know I'm in the minority with that opinion. This experience can be one of the greatest you will ever play, but that's only if it hits you in the right way. The developers knew that, and if you didn't buy into Abby's journey, then the whole story falls apart for you, and that's exactly what happened for me. The overwhelming positivity I've seen for this game is reassurance that at least Naughty Dog's efforts actually landed for the majority of people. I just feel that I truly missed out on an experience that this game will never be able to give me since I've already beaten it once. It is incredibly hard to get someone to change their opinion on anything, especially something as deeply personal as video games. These stories that we are told through this medium can be life-changing for some people, and I hope this video has clearly demonstrated how I feel about this game, without slandering the entire ecosystem that had a part in creating this beautiful story. This video was not made in order to get you to change your mind. This is just my personal journey through the game that differed from most people's. It is especially hard to create something that affects people in so many different ways and allows for different interpretations, while also still making it entertaining. Naughty Dog set out to do exactly that. They accomplished their goal of making a divisive game while still being effective in impacting players in the ways that they had hoped. That is the mark of a successful product, and Druckmann succeeded in making something that's not just okay, but something that is truly different for each person. That's either a good thing or a bad thing. The answer just depends on your personal journey through The Last of Us Part 2. Guys, thank you so much for making it to the end of the video. You guys know what to do already. Like every YouTuber's gonna say, like and subscribe. That's really the only way that can help me grow and actually get me picked up by the algorithm. This video took like 2 months to make, 40 minutes. God, why did I even think of doing that? Basically, here to also plug my Twitter, @JoystickDrummer. If you want to follow any of my gaming opinions or just keep up on the progress of videos that I'm making, you can check it out right there. Jump cut. Okay, thank you guys so much. Subscribe, like, and have a great rest of your day.